Welcome, gentle listener, to a quiet journey through the echoes of time. Tonight, we drift back to a period often shrouded in mist and myth, the Middle Ages. But our focus will not be on the clang of swords, the politics of kings, or the cries of battle. Instead, we seek refuge within the serene yet rigorously ordered walls of a medieval monastery. Here, in these secluded havens of stone and silence, a different kind of life unfolded, one dedicated to a rhythm that was both ancient and eternal. Imagine a world where time was marked not by the frantic ticking of a clock, but by the sun's slow, graceful arc across the sky and the regular solemn call of a distant bell. A world of quiet contemplation, of dedicated, meaningful labor, and of an unshakable faith that shaped every hour of every day. We will explore the routines, the simple comforts, and the enduring disciplines that defined the lives of those who chose to withdraw from the world, seeking a different kind of existence, a different kind of wealth. This is a journey designed to calm the mind, to ease the restless thoughts that populate our modern lives. We will immerse ourselves in the measured pace of monastic life, finding a strange comfort in its predictability, a deep peace in its purpose. Settle in, breathe softly, and let the gentle currents of history carry you away from the concerns of today and into a peaceful slumber. Our exploration begins within the very heart of their daily existence, where cold stone walls held not a prison, but a profound sense of purpose, and the silence was not empty, but full of meaning. The cold stone and constant prayer, a monk's humble existence. Imagine, if you will, the deep, impenetrable darkness of the hour before dawn. It is perhaps 2 o'clock in the morning. Outside the monastery walls, the secular world is fast asleep. But here, life is about to stir. A profound chill, born of stone and damp earth, seeps into your very bones. It is a constant companion in the unheated corridors and Spartan cells of your monastic home. You are a medieval monk, perhaps a Benedictine, living under the rule of Saint Benedict, and your vow of stability means this monastery is your world, your life. From this moment until your last breath, there is a quiet comfort in that certainty, a release from the endless choices of the outside world. The silence is absolute, a thick blanket over the sleeping community. It is a sacred silence, not merely an absence of noise, but a space for God. You might hear the faint, rustling sound of a mouse in the thatch, or the distant, lonely hoot of an owl from the monastery woods. But otherwise, there is nothing. Then it comes, a single, solemn bell tolls. Its sound does not shatter the silence, but rather gives it shape and form. It resonates through the thick stone walls, a physical vibration that you feel as much as you hear. This is the call to vigils, or matins, the first and longest of the 8 daily canonical hours. Slowly, you rise from your simple straw-filled pallet. The floor is cold stone, and you move with a practiced quietness. Your habit, made of rough, undyed wool, offers little warmth against the pervasive chill, but its familiar weight is a comfort, a uniform that erases individual vanity. You are one of many, a single thread in a larger tapestry. Your cell is a study in renunciation. It is small, barely large enough for the bed, a small wooden stool, and perhaps a niche in the wall for a psalter. There are no decorations, no personal effects, save for a simple wooden cross. Every object, or rather, the lack of objects, is designed to turn your focus inward, away from the distractions of the material world and towards the landscape of the soul. You join a silent procession of shadows, moving through the dormitory and down the night stair, which often leads directly into the transept of the church. The air in the cloister is even colder, sharp, and clean in your lungs. Moonlight might filter through the arched colonnades, casting long, ethereal patterns on the worn flagstones, stones smoothed by centuries of pacing, prayerful feet just like yours. You see the faint silhouettes of your brothers, their heads bowed, their forms identical in the gloom. No words are exchanged. The great silence, which began after prayers the previous evening, is still in effect. Entering the chapel is like entering another world. The air is thick with the lingering scent of old incense, melted beeswax, and ancient stone. The darkness here is even deeper, punctuated only by a few flickering candles on the altar, their small flames dancing like captured stars. The chancel, where you take your place in the choir stalls, is unheated. You can see your breath plume in the frigid air. You are not here for comfort. You are here for devotion. The abbot gives a quiet signal, and the first chant begins. Your voice, at first a little rough from sleep, joins the chorus of your brothers. The sound of the Gregorian chant fills the vast, empty space of the church. It is antiphonal, with one side of the choir singing a verse, and the other responding. The Latin words, learned by heart, flow in a timeless, melodic rhythm. You are singing psalms, ancient poems of praise, lament, and wisdom. For the next hour or two, this is your world. The rise and fall of the chant, the flickering candlelight, the collective presence of your brethren, all united in a single act of worship in the heart of the night. It is a profound experience, lifting you out of your own small self and into something vast and eternal, as the final Amen of Matins echoes into silence. It is followed by lauds, the office of praise, timed to end with the first hint of dawn. As you chant, you notice the tall, narrow windows of the chapel slowly transforming from impenetrable black to a soft, luminous gray. The arrival of the light feels like a quiet miracle every single day, a divine response to your prayers. When the service concludes, the first light of a new day is upon you. The great silence is lifted, but still, a sense of quiet purpose pervades. You file out of the chapel to begin the day's practical routines. The morning ablutions are simple and functional. At a long stone trough in the cloister, the lavabo, you wash your face and hands in a basin of shockingly cold water. There is no luxury, only necessity. The shared nature of this space, like all others, reinforces the communal identity over the individual. After a brief period for private prayer or reading, the bell tolls again for prime, the first hour of daylight prayer. Following this, the community gathers in the chapter house. This is a formal meeting, a cornerstone of the monastery's discipline and governance. You take your seat on a stone bench lining the wall. The abbot, seated in a more prominent chair, reads a passage from the Rule of Saint Benedict, the foundational text for your entire way of life. He might offer a short commentary, a homily on its meaning for the day ahead. Then, the day's work is assigned. Perhaps you are tasked to the scriptorium, or the gardens, or the bakehouse. This is also the time for a public confession, not of grave sins, but of minor faults against the rule. A moment of inattention during prayer, a sharp word spoken in haste, a tool misplaced. To stand and admit you're failing before your brothers is a profound act of humility, designed to chip away at pride, the greatest of spiritual dangers. The atmosphere is solemn, disciplined, yet also fraternal and supportive. Then, the morning's labor begins. If your assignment is in the fields, you walk out into the crisp morning air. The monastery is a world unto itself, but it is deeply connected to the land and the seasons. In spring, your work might be guiding a heavy, ox-drawn plow through the wet, dark earth. The smell of the soil, rich and promising, your muscles ache with the effort, the rhythm of the work hypnotic. Step, push, turn. In the heat of summer, the work is harvesting, the sun beating down on your back as you swing a scythe through fields of wheat or barley, the air filled with the scent of cut grain and dust. In autumn, it is gathering fruits from the orchard, your fingers stained with the juice of apples and pears. And in the depths of winter, the work moves indoors, mending tools in the workshop, weaving baskets, or threshing grain on the floor of a great barn. All this work is ora et labora, prayer and work, intertwined. The physical exertion is its own form of prayer, an offering made through sweat and effort. The silence is maintained, your thoughts turned inward as your body works. If your task is in the scriptorium, your world is one of intense, quiet concentration. The room is designed for light, but even so, the illumination is often meager. You sit at a slanted desk, a large, prepared sheet of vellum before you. Your tools are simple: a penknife to sharpen your quill, a stylus to make faint, invisible guidelines on the page, and pots of ink. The ink itself is a product of monastic craft, often made from oak galls, mixed with iron salts, a recipe that creates a deep, permanent black. Your task is to copy a text, perhaps a Bible, a Psalter, or a classical work by Virgil or Cicero that the monastery is preserving. The script you use is precise, perhaps a beautiful Carolingian minuscule, with its clear, rounded letters. Each stroke of the quill must be perfect. Your back aches from leaning forward. Your eyes burn from the strain of focusing on the tiny letters. A moment's distraction, a tremble of the hand, can ruin a page that represents hours of work. The only sound is the collective, soft scratching of dozens of quills moving across parchment, a sound like gentle rain on a roof. It is a different kind of labor from the fields, but no less demanding, requiring a discipline of the mind as rigorous as any physical toil. The bell tolls for terce, the third hour, and later for sext. At midday, you lay down your tools or your quill and process back to the chapel for these shorter prayer services, which punctuate the day, constantly recentering your focus on the divine. After sext, it is time for the main meal. You file into the refectory, a long, high-ceilinged hall. You wash your hands again at the lavabo before taking your place at long wooden tables. The meal is eaten in complete silence, the only sound being the voice of a single monk, the designated lector, reading aloud from a sacred text from a pulpit. The food is simple, designed for sustenance, not pleasure. A thick pottage, a stew of grains, peas, and root vegetables from the garden is a daily staple. It is served with dense, dark bread, made from rye or barley. There might be some cheese, or perhaps an egg. On feast days, there could be fish. Meat is generally forbidden, except for the sick. To drink, there is water, or a weak, watered-down ale or wine. You eat what you are given, gratefully and without complaint. It is another lesson in humility and the denial of worldly pleasure. After the meal, there might be a brief period for rest, a nap, or some quiet reading in the cloister. This is a precious, semi-private time in a life that is almost entirely communal. Then it is back to work until the bell calls for none, the ninth hour prayer service. As the afternoon wears on, the light begins to change, the sun slanting lower in the sky. The work continues, but there is a sense of the day winding down. Vespers, the evening prayer, is one of the most beautiful services. As dusk gathers, more candles are lit in the chapel, casting a warm, gentle glow. The chants of Vespers are often melodic and hopeful, celebrating the light of Christ in the face of oncoming darkness. After this service, there might be a light evening meal, a collation, which could be just a drink of ale and a piece of bread, before the community gathers for the final office of the day. Compline. Compline is a quiet, intimate prayer service. It is a final commendation of oneself to God's protection through the night. As the last hymn is sung, a profound ritual begins. The abbot walks through the chapel, sprinkling holy water on his monks. The great silence descends once more. From this moment until after matins the next morning, no word will be spoken. It is a deep, purposeful silence, a complete cessation of worldly communication, allowing the soul to be alone with God. You walk back to your cell, the day's cycle complete. The darkness has returned, as it was when you awoke. Your small, Spartan room feels like a sanctuary, a haven of peace after the long day of prayer and labor. You lie down on your straw pallet, the rough wool of your blanket a familiar comfort. Your body is tired, but your mind is calm, anchored by the steady, predictable rhythm of the monastic life. You close your eyes, your last thoughts a quiet prayer, ready to begin the cycle all over again in just a few short hours in the deep and silent heart of the night. Segment 2. Hildegard's Visions. A nun's quiet revolution in the Rhineland. From the collective, often anonymous, rhythm of the monk's daily life, where each soul sought spiritual perfection within a common framework, we now turn our attention to a singular, extraordinary soul, a woman whose inner world was so vibrant, so profound, that it shone a light that reached far beyond the stone walls of her convent. We journey now to 12th century Germany, to the life of Hildegard of Bingen, a figure whose quiet revolution unfolded not on battlefields, but within the confines of her mind, her art, and her unwavering spirit. Her story begins not with grandeur or dramatic pronouncements, but with a humble, almost unseen promise. Born in 1098, likely the 10th child, to a noble family in what is now Rheinhessen, she was, as was the custom for a 10th child, symbolically offered to the church as a spiritual tithe. This practice, known as decima, meant a life dedicated to God from a very early age. Thus, at just 8 years old, a time when most children were still deeply engaged in play, Hildegard's path diverged dramatically from the secular world. Imagine that tender age, separated from your family, to be placed under the tutelage of an anchoress, Jutta von Sponheim, a respected noblewoman and spiritual recluse. Their cell was not a large, bustling monastery, but a small enclosed space attached to the male Benedictine monastery of Disibodenberg. Your world shrinks to a modest room with a window looking into the church, allowing you to hear and participate in the liturgical hours, and another, smaller window, through which necessities like food were passed. The outside world, with its sounds, its distractions, its fleeting pleasures, becomes a distant memory. Your companions are Yuta, perhaps a few other female novices who joined later, and the constant, permeating presence of God. It was in this profound quiet, this deep spiritual isolation, that Hildegard's unique intellect and spiritual life were allowed to blossom. Nurtured by Yuta's guidance, she learned to read and write Latin, to interpret the scriptures, and to engage in deep theological reflection. The silence within those walls was not empty for Hildegard. It was, as she described, often filled with the reflection of the living light, the source of her profound visions. These were not dreams nor trances, but vivid, luminous images and sounds, perceived with her inner senses while she was fully awake. From her earliest childhood, these visions were a part of her reality, though she initially kept them a closely guarded secret, fearing misunderstanding or even accusations of madness. She confided only in Yuta, and, later, in the monk, Volmar, who would become her lifelong secretary and confidant. For decades, Hildegard lived this life of quiet enclosure, adhering strictly to the Benedictine rule we have just explored. She participated in the daily offices, engaged in manual labor, and devoted herself to study. But as she approached her early 40s, something momentous shifted. She felt an overwhelming pressure, a divine command to record what she saw and heard, to share the revelations that had shaped her inner world for so long. Hesitantly at first, fearing the task too great, she began to dictate her experiences to Volmar. The result was her first great theological work, Civias, meaning Know the Ways of the Lord. The book is a breathtaking tapestry of symbolic theology, a monumental spiritual journey through creation, the fall, redemption, and the structure of the cosmos, all revealed through her unique, often complex, visual and auditory spiritual lens. As Volmar painstakingly copied her words, sometimes adding his own illustrations in the margins, the silent work of the scriptorium became the conduit for a visionary's profound insights. This was not the dry theology of scholastic debate, but a vibrant, deeply personal encounter with the divine, expressed through vivid imagery and powerful lyrical language. But Hildegard's towering intellect and insatiable curiosity were not limited to the purely divine. Her mind was a bridge between the spiritual and the physical world. She walked through the convent gardens, not just as a place of peaceful contemplation, but as a living library of God's creation. She believed deeply in the interconnectedness of all things, the cosmic order, the human body, the natural world, a concept she termed viriditas, or greenness, symbolizing the divine life force, the vitality that pervaded all of creation. From this perspective, she studied the herbs, the trees, the very stones, believing that each held a divine purpose, a healing power, a reflection of God's wisdom. She compiled her meticulous observations into two monumental works of natural history and medicine, Physica and Causae et Curae. These books detailed hundreds of plants, animals, and minerals, describing their properties, their uses in remedies, and even offering insights into the causes and cures of various ailments. Imagine her moving slowly through the convent garden, her gaze observant, her mind connecting the delicate petals of a rose to its potential healing properties, or understanding the subtle humors of the human body and how they might be brought back into balance through simple, natural means. Her approach was deeply holistic, understanding that the health of the body and the spirit were inextricably linked, and that nature provided the remedies. This was practical monastic science, born of observation and deep respect for creation. Her boundless creativity flowed into music as well. Hildegard was a prolific composer, creating some of the most innovative and hauntingly beautiful music of the medieval period. While much of the music of her time, particularly Gregorian chant, was often restricted to a narrow melodic range, Hildegard's compositions, particularly her Symphonia, or Symphony of the Harmony of Celestial Revelations, broke free. Her melodies were soaring, expansive, and deeply expressive, often utilizing wider intervals and more complex structures than was customary. Her music was another facet of her visions, an attempt to translate the profound divine sounds and spiritual ecstasy she experienced into something that could be heard and shared by others. These sacred songs were performed by her nuns, filling the convent chapel with ethereal beauty, a soundscape designed to uplift the soul and draw it closer to the divine, while living a life of quiet devotion and profound intellectual pursuit. Hildegard was also a figure of remarkable strength and quiet resolve. As the community of nuns under her care grew significantly, outstripping the capacity of their small enclosure at Disibodenberg, Hildegard felt a powerful divine imperative to establish a new, independent convent. This was no small feat. Her decision to move the nuns to Rupertsberg, a site near Bingen with significant symbolic meaning for her, was fiercely resisted by the male monks and abbots of Disibodenberg. They saw her and her nuns as valuable assets, financially and spiritually, and did not wish to lose them. But Hildegard, armed with unshakable conviction in her divine mission and a surprising political acumen, persisted. She endured immense pressure, even suffering a period of serious illness, which she interpreted as a divine sign that she must establish the new foundation. Through letters, appeals, and unwavering resolve, she eventually secured the necessary permissions. In 1150, at the age of 52, she led her community of nuns to Rupertsberg, where they built a thriving, independent convent. This was a true act of quiet defiance, a brave assertion of female spiritual authority and leadership in a deeply patriarchal society. Her revolution was not one of overt rebellion or loud protest, but of quiet, steadfast conviction, born of her profound spiritual experiences and her unshakable confidence in her own unique calling. She communicated not through force of arms, but through the eloquent power of her words, engaging in an extensive correspondence with popes, emperors, kings, abbots, and other influential figures across Europe, offering advice, admonishment, and prophetic insights. Hildegard of Bingen lived a long and incredibly productive life, passing away in 1179 at the age of 81. Her life, though marked by extraordinary intellectual and spiritual achievements, was still lived within the comforting, rhythmic structure of the monastic day, anchored by the divine offices and the disciplined rhythm of work and prayer. Her genius blossomed within the very structure and constraints of the Benedictine rule, demonstrating how a disciplined existence, far from stifling creativity, can in fact become a vessel for the most profound forms of human intellect artistry and wisdom. She remains a beacon, a quiet testament to the enduring power of a woman's spirit, patiently, persistently bringing forth light into the world. Segment 3: The Secret Lives of Illuminated Manuscripts. Beyond the golden pages, from the deeply personal, visionary world of Hildegard of Bingen, expressed through her profound writings and music, our journey now takes us into the silent, painstaking world where beauty and devotion intertwined on a daily basis. The monastic scriptorium. This was not merely a room for writing, it was the heart of medieval knowledge preservation, the birthplace of the illuminated manuscript, and a profound testament to the quiet artistry of countless, often anonymous hands. Imagine stepping into this hushed hall, often located within the monastery's cloister, designed to capture the best natural light possible through its large, arched windows. Even on the brightest days, the illumination inside would be gentle, filtered. The air might carry the faint, distinctive scent of parchment, subtle, almost leathery aroma, mingled with the earthier notes of ink, and perhaps the subtle sweetness of beeswax from the candles used on darker days. Monks, or sometimes nuns in female convents, would sit in rows at simple wooden desks, their backs slightly hunched, their forms absorbed in intense concentration over large, prepared sheets of vellum. Vellum, a fine parchment made from the skin of calves, goats, or lambs, was the canvas for these masterpieces. Its preparation alone was a long and laborious process, itself a monastic craft. Animal skins would be soaked in lime, meticulously scraped to remove hair and flesh, stretched taut on frames, and then painstakingly scraped again with a curved knife until they were thin, smooth, and translucent. The quality of the vellum varied, but the best was supple, velvety to the touch, and provided an exquisite surface for ink and paint. To prepare a sheet for writing, a pricker would make tiny holes along the edges, and then a stylus or a lead point would be used to rule faint, almost invisible lines across the page, ensuring perfectly straight lines of text and consistent margins. This initial stage, often overlooked, demanded immense precision and patience. The creation of an illuminated manuscript was a slow, collaborative dance of many specialized hands, often taking months, even years, to complete a single volume. It would begin with the scribes, the copyists. Their hands moved with precise, almost meditative control, forming each letter with a quill pen, usually crafted from a goose or swan feather. The quill's tip had to be meticulously cut and recut with a sharp penknife throughout the day to maintain a perfect point. The ink, a deep, rich black, was often derived from lampblack mixed with a gum arabic, or from iron gall, a solution made from oak galls, outgrowths on oak trees that created a remarkably stable and permanent dark ink. The consistency of the script, the even spacing between words and lines, the perfect formation of each character, these were not just skills, but acts of profound devotion, ensuring the sacred words were rendered with utmost reverence and legibility. Each word copied was a prayer in itself, a testament to the enduring power of the written word. Once the scribe had meticulously copied the main text, the manuscript would pass to the rubricator. This artisan's task was to add the headings, initial capitals, and other important sections of the text in red ink, known as rubrics, from rubrica, Latin for red earth. These red elements guided the reader, highlighting key passages and making the text easier to navigate. This also required steady hands and a good eye for balance and spacing. Only then would the true magic of the illuminators begin. Their palette was astonishingly vibrant, especially considering the limitations of the age and the natural origins of their materials. Pigments were not simply bought in tubes. They were painstakingly prepared in the studio itself. Deep blues came from lapis lazuli, a precious stone imported from Afghanistan, crushed and refined through a complex process that yielded the most brilliant ultramarine. Fiery reds might come from cinnabar, a mineral containing mercury sulfide, or cochineal insects, brilliant greens from malachite, earthy browns from ochre, and shimmering yellows from orpiment. Each raw pigment had to be meticulously ground into a fine powder, often on a stone slab with a muller, a process that could take hours for a single color. This powder would then be mixed with a binder, typically egg yolk, creating a tempera paint, gum arabic, or animal glue, to create a workable, opaque paint that would adhere to the vellum. Then came the extraordinary technique of applying gold leaf. This was the true illumination, making the page shine with light. Imagine the illuminator carefully breathing onto a small area of the vellum where gold was to be applied, creating a subtle moisture. On top of this, a very thin layer of gesso, a mixture of plaster of Paris, lead white, and animal glue, would be applied to create a slightly raised surface. Once this gesso was dry, a tissue-thin sheet of pure gold leaf, painstakingly beaten until it was almost transparent, would be gently laid upon it. With a soft, burnishing tool, often a polished agate stone set in a handle, the gold would be gently rubbed until it shone with a captivating brilliance, reflecting the light and transforming the page into something truly transcendent. The initial capital letters, the elaborate borders, and the miniature illustrations would literally glow, making the words seem almost divinely inspired, catching the eye and elevating the text. But beyond the obvious beauty and devotional purpose, these manuscripts often hold secret lives, hidden meanings embedded in their margins and illustrations, and sometimes unexpected humor. Look closely at the borders, and you might find more than just floral motifs or intricate geometric patterns. You might discover marginalia, small, often fantastical figures known as drolleries. These could be anything from a knight battling a snail to a rabbit playing a lute, a monkey riding a dog, or a bizarre hybrid creature that is half human and half animal. These often quirky, sometimes subversive, and frequently humorous figures were a quiet rebellion of human wit in the midst of profound solemnity. They remind us that even within the strictest discipline of monastic life, the human spirit found ways to express playfulness, wit, and unexpected joy. These tiny, uninhibited drawings, often hidden in plain sight, offer a fascinating glimpse into the less formal, more mischievous side of the medieval mind. They were perhaps a small relief from the rigorous copying, a shared smile among those who knew where to look. Every illuminated manuscript is a unique artifact, a silent conversation across centuries. They speak not only of the skill of the artisans, the profound devotion of their creators, and the theological depth of their content, but also of the sheer, quiet endurance required. To create a single volume meant countless hours, days, weeks, months, sometimes even years, spent in meticulous, patient labor. Each carefully formed letter, each vibrant dab of paint, each shimmering fleck of gold represents a moment of focused attention, a silent prayer, a contribution to the preservation of knowledge and beauty in an era before the printing press. They are, in essence, the quiet, golden heart of medieval learning and artistry, patiently awaiting our rediscovery, inviting us to contemplate the profound dedication that brought them into being. Segment 4. The Abbot's Table, Power, Patronage, and the Monastic Economy. From the quiet, contemplative labor of the scribe and illuminator, where sacred texts were lovingly brought to life with shimmering gold and vibrant hues, we now broaden our lens considerably. Our gaze extends beyond the immediate confines of the cloister walls to encompass the grander, more intricate world of the medieval monastery as a powerhouse of economy, influence, and social order. We turn our attention to the figure at its very pinnacle, the abbot, or in the case of a female community, the abbess, and the profound, often unseen, economic engine that allowed these spiritual havens to flourish, to endure, and to shape the very fabric of medieval society through centuries of profound change. Imagine a monastery not merely as a collection of cells and chapels, but as a vast, meticulously organized enterprise, a self-sufficient commune, indeed, a miniature kingdom operating under the serene banner of spiritual devotion. These institutions, over the centuries, had acquired immense landholdings, not just the few acres immediately surrounding the central cloister, but sprawling tracts of fertile fields stretching into the distance, dense, ancient forests providing invaluable timber and game, meandering rivers and tranquil ponds teeming with fish, and often entire villages with their populations of serfs, tenants, and freeholders who lived under monastic governance. These lands were often granted by kings or nobles, driven by fervent piety, seeking spiritual merit and the promise of prayers for their souls, or they were acquired through shrewd management, strategic marriage alliances, and generations of careful investment and donation. The sheer scale of these holdings meant that the resources flowing into the monastic coffers, the grain from the fields, the timber from the woods, the wool from vast flocks of sheep, the very labor and rents from the tenants, formed the inexhaustible bedrock of the monastic economy, allowing the community not only to subsist, but to thrive, to grow, and to extend its influence far beyond its consecrated grounds. The abbot, or the abbess, was, therefore, much more than simply a spiritual leader guiding the souls of their flock towards salvation. They were formidable administrators, astute managers, and often skilled diplomats. One could liken them to the chief executive of a large, complex organization, albeit one whose ultimate, overarching purpose was divine, rooted in the pursuit of God's glory and the salvation of souls. Their daily schedule, while still rigorously punctuated by the 8 canonical hours of prayer that structured the lives of every monk or nun, was profoundly shaped by an extensive array of secular and administrative duties. The abbot's morning, after matins and lauds, might not always lead directly to manual labor in the fields. Instead, he might retire to his private study, a space slightly more comfortable than the common cells, perhaps with a fire in the hearth on cold mornings, and a desk piled with scrolls and ledgers. Here, he would begin his day by conferring with key monastic officials. There was the cellarer, the monk responsible for managing the monastery's provisions, supplies, and finances, a demanding role that required both piety and sharp business acumen. Discussions would range from inventories of grain in the storage barns, to the quality of the current year's brew of ale, to the precise costs of parchment for the scriptorium. Then there was the prior or prioress in a female house, the abbot's second in command, handling the internal discipline and daily oversight of the monastic community itself. The abbot would also receive reports from his bailiffs or reeves, often lay brothers or trusted tenants, who managed distant granges. These were outlying farmsteads or estates, sometimes miles away from the main abbey, that were integral parts of the monastic holdings. He would review meticulously kept accounts, perhaps in beautiful calligraphic script, in thick, leather-bound ledgers, detailing expenditures, revenues, and tithes. He would hear petitions from the serfs or free tenants who lived on monastic lands, resolving disputes over land boundaries, inheritance, or minor infractions. This was a direct, personal form of justice, dispensed with authority and, ideally, with fairness, ensuring the smooth running of the agrarian economy that sustained them all. Correspondence with the local secular lords, powerful bishops, and even the king or the pope was a constant necessity, asserting the monastery's rights, seeking new privileges, negotiating tithes, or offering counsel on matters of faith and governance. This was a world of quiet diplomacy, of patient negotiation, where spiritual authority was often intertwined with very real temporal power, making the abbot a significant figure in the wider regional landscape. Monasteries, through their sustained, organized labor and long-term vision, were often at the very forefront of agricultural and technological innovation in the Middle Ages. Unlike individual peasant farmers, who might be limited by family labor or short-term concerns, monastic communities had the resources, the collective workforce, and the multi-generational perspective to invest in long-term improvements. Through centuries of careful record-keeping, observation, and diligent labor, monks became highly skilled experts in advanced crop rotation techniques, methods of fertilization, and selective animal husbandry. You might imagine the vast monastic fields systematically divided into 3 field rotations, with some areas left fallow to rejuvenate the soil, a practice far more efficient than simple 2-field systems. This increased yields and ensured a more stable food supply. They raised vast flocks of sheep, providing not only essential meat and milk, but also the precious wool that could be used for their habits, for blankets, or significantly, sold in bustling markets, generating substantial external income. Herds of cattle provided milk, cheese, and the vital muscle for the heavy plows that turned the earth. Pigs foraged in the extensive monastic forests, adding to the monastery's larder with their rich meat and lard. Beyond arable farming and livestock, monasteries developed and excelled in specialized industries and crafts, often becoming regional leaders. Many were renowned for their breweries and vineyards. Imagine the rich, yeasty, comforting smell emanating from the monastic brewhouse, a bustling but orderly space where great wooden vats of barley malt and hops slowly fermented into ale or beer. The process was long and meticulous, malting the grain, mashing it to extract sugars, boiling it with hops for flavor and preservation, and then allowing it to ferment in cool, dark cellars. This ale was not only consumed by the monks themselves, a safer and often more nutritious alternative to unreliable water sources, but was also generously provided to guests and critically sold in nearby towns and cities, generating significant income for the abbey. Similarly, in regions with suitable climates, vineyards, carefully cultivated and tended through generations of monastic care, produced fine wines that were both for sacramental use during Mass and for extensive trade, their quality often far superior to the wines produced by individual peasants. The quiet hum of the apiary, where monks tended beehives for honey and beeswax, essential for candles in the chapel and scriptorium, also contributed to this diverse economy. The continuous, rhythmic sound of the monastery mill, often ingeniously water-powered by a diverted stream or river, was a familiar and comforting sound, a testament to monastic engineering. Here, the grains harvested from monastic lands, and often from the tenants' fields, were efficiently ground into flour between massive, rotating millstones. This guaranteed a steady, independent supply of bread for the monastic community and provided a vital service to the surrounding populace, who would pay a fee in kind or coin for the use of the monastery's superior milling capabilities. Other crafts flourished within the monastery's walls. The quiet, methodical tapping of hammers from the blacksmith's forge, creating and repairing tools for the farm and the monastery itself. The rhythmic clack of looms in the weaving sheds, where wool from their own sheep was spun into thread and meticulously woven into coarse cloth for habits or finer textiles for sale. The silent, skilled art of carpentry and masonry, producing furniture, repairing structures, and continually building new additions to the ever-growing monastic complex. These were not simply individual workshops, but integral parts of a complex, interconnected economic ecosystem, overseen by the abbot's comprehensive vision. Monasteries were not only self-sufficient and economically powerful, they were also vital centers of patronage and intellectual influence in a largely illiterate and fragmented world. As we explored with the scriptoria, they were the primary preservers of ancient knowledge, diligently copying, studying, and often beautifully illustrating manuscripts, acting as the living libraries of their age. Their libraries were vast, containing not only sacred texts, Bibles, psalters, patristic writings, but also invaluable works of classical philosophy, history, medicine, and early scientific treatises. These collections were veritable storehouses of human wisdom, safeguarding knowledge through periods of profound instability. Many larger monasteries operated robust schools, providing an unparalleled education not just for their oblates, children dedicated to monastic life from an early age, but sometimes for promising young men from noble families who might never take vows, thus contributing significantly to the intellectual and administrative life of the wider secular society. The very presence of such learning centers attracted scholars and thinkers, fostering intellectual discourse within their quiet walls. Perhaps most profoundly, monasteries embodied the medieval concept of hospitality and charity, fulfilling core Christian tenets. The hospitium, or guest house, was a cornerstone of monastic life, typically a separate building set apart from the main monastic enclosure. Here, weary pilgrims traveling on religious journeys, itinerant merchants, and even noble visitors found dignified lodging, nourishing food, and spiritual solace, often for free or for a modest offering. In an age before widespread inns and established public travel routes, monasteries provided absolutely essential way stations, offering safety, comfort, and sustenance to travelers in often perilous times. Beyond formal guests, monasteries were often the primary, consistent source of almsgiving to the local poor and needy in the surrounding communities. You can imagine the quiet, humble procession of the poor gathered daily at the monastery gates, receiving a dole of bread, pottage, or other surplus food, a constant, tangible reminder of the monastery's sacred obligation to care for the most vulnerable. This act of charity cemented their place not just as spiritual leaders, but as indispensable pillars of social welfare. The abbot's table, therefore, when formal guests were present, symbolized more than just a meal. It represented a confluence of spiritual authority, considerable wealth, diplomatic skill, and social responsibility. While the daily refectory meal for the common monk was a simple, silent, communal affair, the abbot's private table, on occasions of receiving important visitors, a visiting bishop, a local count, or a royal envoy, would reflect the monastery's standing and generosity. Though far from the extravagance of a king's court, it would feature finer cuts of meat, perhaps fresh fish caught from the monastic ponds, and certainly the monastery's best wines or ales. Here, in a setting of quiet dignity, important conversations would take place. Discussions of theology, local politics, land management, or the latest news from distant lands brought by travelers. This was where the subtle power dynamics of the age often played out, beneath the outward appearance of pious devotion and monastic humility. As our immersive journey through the medieval monastery finally draws to a close, we leave behind the echoing cloisters, the subtle scent of old parchment, and the deep, reassuring hum of the monastic mill. We carry with us a deeper and far more nuanced understanding of lives dedicated to a rhythm both ancient and profoundly influential. We have seen lives shaped by cold stone and constant prayer, by quiet revolution and hidden beauty, by the meticulous dedication of the scribe, and by the strategic foresight of the abbot. Monasteries, in their quiet stability and remarkable self-sufficiency, stood as indispensable beacons of order, learning, economic innovation, and charity in a turbulent, often chaotic, medieval world. They silently, patiently shaped the landscape, preserved culture, and formed the very fabric of medieval society for 1,000 years. Their enduring legacy, captured in the stillness of their surviving ruins and the quiet echoes of their past, reminds us that purpose, patience, and a well-ordered life, even a seemingly boring one, can create something truly magnificent and lasting, offering a profound sense of peace. May these quiet reflections, these gentle currents of history, bring you deep repose and guide you softly, serenely, into a restful and restorative sleep. Good night.